Midjourney.
It's just as fast as leaving a text message, and you can do it anywhere. You can get internet access.
It's faster, and also it makes a picture.
Yeah. I was at my son's wrestling tournament, and we had the lowest, most pitiful. You couldn't make a phone call and get a signal, but there's enough of a signal that I could actually still see Midjourney. And I was sending prompts.
You can just send it, and you can't see the results either.
So it was great. I come back to the house and I look and I'm like, this is really cool what I created. I had no clue.
Yeah.
Good morning. This is Brian Sykes. Actually, it's not morning, evening. It's just whenever. This is Brian Sykes, and we are introducing the AI Explorer AI Creators Collective. And I'm excited to introduce to you guys Ben. And what I want to do is I want to give Ben Currier an opportunity first to kind of give us a background of how he got here into the AI space. But so Ben, rather than jumping into the AI right away, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of the lead up to before AI kind of took off for you.
Yeah, so my name is Ben Currier. I teach Microsoft Excel online at excelexposure.com, which is a very boring part of my life in my own opinion. So I've also tried to figure out many different ways to distract myself, including I call it podcrastinating with my podcast, which is called the Failure Guy Podcast. I interview successful people about their failures, including Carol Baskin from Tiger King and William Hung from American Idol. And when I got interested in Midjourney, or at least AI art, is because I saw just a random video on YouTube talking about DALL-E Mini, and it was showing someone putting in like a cat image and then comparing that to a regular cat picture. And I'm like, wow, AI art can do this stuff. First of all, I didn't know what AI art was. I was like, wow, AI art's a thing. Then I was like, wow, AI art can do this. And then I was like, wow, I can do this. So it quickly transformed, and then I heard about Midjourney, which I think at the time either was only waitlist only, or like there were secret access ways. So I was like, how do I get access to this thing? And I eventually, I think they opened up to the public in August, if memories serves, but I remember that's when I came on board. And then I made 8 different Discords, and I generated 200 images because you can do some free ones.
Right.
So I've made a bunch of accounts, which is I regret because it gets confusing sometimes who I am. So I'd say don't do that. But the point was I had to try it out a bunch of times, and it wasn't giving me enough. So then I made my official account, and since then I've done over 18,000 images in Midjourney, over 10,000 in relaxed mode, which is not many people get to. By the time this is released, who knows? But I've just been obsessed with it, and it's amazing what it can do. I've had like 0 graphic design skills up until Midjourney. I've done oil paintings and some traditional art mediums in the past, but I've not done any graphic design, and so this just took my graphic design abilities from 0 to a trillion. It's like not even normal abilities. It's extraordinary, abnormal abilities. So
right now, I was
I'm very happy for it existing.
I was wondering if you had any background in design whatsoever. And I know you've done a lot of things, of course, working with Excel, but of course, Excel is not your typical design field platform anyway.
No, I'd be like trying to promote the course, and I'd download maybe an SVG of a stock logo thing that I made, that I bought, and then I would edit that. So I have like some minor experience in tweaking things around, but I don't have like ground up experience in building any kind of thing besides something terrible, like really bad things. So this took it to where like I can make anything. I can visualize things. I can fill in all the gaps. It doesn't do good with certain things like text and stuff, but that's the easiest thing to do in another program. So I was just off to the races, and then I pretty quickly because I have ADHD, I got bored with doing the stuff that's normal, like trying to come up with fun, cool photorealistic scenes, or trying to make logos, or trying to make other things. So then I was like, well, how can I get it to do weird stuff that then I become more of a curator than a creator of seeing what pops out and what appeals to me, because I want to be stuff that's new to not just me, but like just new to the world,
Right.
new ways of art coming out, because I was realizing it was so powerful. It could do things I'd never even dreamed of
Yeah.
or imagined.
It's kind of like going into the kitchen and grabbing the most obscure ingredients and coming up with something that's fabulous. You're like, okay, that doesn't even make sense. Okay, let's try again. So it's
Yeah,
really fascinating.
exactly.
So
It, it,
walk us through your creative process then. You're talking about mixing things up in a different way. What is your process for doing text to art inside of Midjourney?
so it's evolved. It used to be hyper specific, like you do. I think
Yeah,
the actual models itself got better at understanding normal human language, and we didn't
it
have to
did.
start putting a comma after everything and putting
Right,
in like every adjective we could think of known to mankind on how to make a 16K UHD ultra realistic, photorealistic, Unreal Engine, whatever.
right,
The million different things you'd put in. Now you can say something like maybe in the in the style of Home and Fashion or Home and Garden magazine, whatever. You can do some things where it'll give you post production, studio lighting, and all those other things baked into an idea
right,
of what you say to it. So I think when I approach it now, it's like, well, what am I making? A, how creative or complicated does it have to be? And then can I use emojis and chaos and other weirdnesses to get a flavor of it that comes out very different than you typically would see it. So I try to maybe
right.
run a normal prompt, then I'll run one with chaos, then I'll switch the aspect ratio, run it again, then run it again with chaos and that aspect ratio, just to see what a couple of things pop out, because a lot of times I don't know what it's going to do to it,
Right.
and then from there I iterate towards what I need. And if I like have to, I'll just go bland with the wording and get more simple. Like if I'm doing this
Yeah.
really intense thing with meditation and minimalism and like all these emojis, and then I'm realizing it's getting too wacky, I might just write meditation minimalism and then see what comes up. And it usually is something that's better than like the weird things I was generating. So I dance between the complex, the simple, and the bizarre.
That's really cool. I don't do as much on the Bazaar, but I'm always interested in what you are creating, and I have to often rerun it and try a few things with it. So, you inspire a lot in that space. Um, as you kind of got to watch this thing since early stages, really from Midjourney, because it released in August of last year for the public, and then you were kind of exploring Dolly. You said you haven't really done very much on Stable Diffusion. I've been watching this growth transition, but as I'm watching it, we can see the amplification of what Midjourney is able to do and what Stable Diffusion is jumping towards. But what do you see the technology? How do you see it evolving in the future? With and then what role do you think you'll play in that evolution?
Well, so for the first time ever, I listened to David Holtz's town hall yesterday, which I streamed live for probably about 200 people on Clubhouse,
Yeah.
because I just started a Clubhouse room or a house yesterday. So I was on Clubhouse for yesterday was my birthday, by the way,
Oh, happy
whenever
birthday.
this airs. And thank you. And so I spent probably 16 hours on Clubhouse talking about Midjourney because
Yeah.
it was my birthday and I could do what I wanted. And uh, throughout that process, I was realizing, well, a lot of the different ways that people gain access to it. How the main thing I found is like people installing the software, like Discord, or getting access to Discord and getting onto Midjourney
Right.
itself are the two biggest hurdles. And then once you show
Agreed.
them that, they can generate stuff pretty quickly. What was your question?
So
I
seeing the technology
had an answer.
evolve
Oh
as
yeah.
it's moving into the
So
future, and then kind of your place in that evolution. What
yeah,
do you think you'll do?
I listened to David Holtz last night, and that was the first time I listened to the founder talk, and I was actually super impressed with his the way he talks about how it was for the artists, and he does a lot of things to make things look aesthetically pleasing and doesn't care about certain things. He talks about in a few versions they'll do text and images, but right now they don't care about perfecting the text
Right.
aspect of it. But he was talking about keeping it not about the money and more about just basically um, the love of art and keeping things less corporatized, less monetized. He wants an old
Right.
grandmother to be able to hop on and generate cats in whatever way she wants. So it gave me a lot more certainty around what they're doing. He did say there's a huge need and a gap in their educational abilities. And so I think folks like you and I could easily fill that gap if Midjourney decides to expand
Yeah.
that. He said we're gonna have to start hiring some people to teach, and
Right.
I'm like, oh, I know some people who who
Yeah.
would be doing it anyways, and also happy to do it for Midjourney. So I'm seeing just my role as being one of many people like you who try to teach people what to do. Your methods are much more well thought out in terms of how to teach it. Mine are just more like getting people interested in showing the work, and
Yeah.
then kind of trapping them with that bait, and then getting them in a room and generating some stuff for them.
I think there's a brilliance to your approach because it's the interest level. Like you almost have to come in to what I'm doing with some ground level experience and, to kind of figure out where in the world you're landing. And with yours, it's sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
here's this really cool emoji, look what happens. And you've stirred people's interest in that space. And then you kind of show the complexity of it's not just this, it's also, and then you got this whole long list of things that got you there too.
Yeah.
So I love that. There's a brilliance there.
Well, I think a part of it is like you don't really understand it until you see it.
Agreed.
You have to see it, and you have to see it live, because if you see it afterwards, it's still something you don't believe because it's so wild and so good that you really
Yeah.
have to either do it yourself or have someone say, sit down, strap in, I'm going to show you some stuff.
Right.
Afterwards, ask me questions, because you're not going to believe this even is real. So
Right.
just get ready, because it's that amazing of a step forward that people just
I agree.
don't understand it. Once they get it, they're like, oh man, where do I sign up for the most extreme version of this? Because I need to do it like every day, all day.
Right. What you see, I mean, if you were to take a person that's not an artist and you walk them through a museum and they show them all the great paintings, they can be inspired and go, that's really cool. And they go home and they're like, that's not something I can do. So, there's not even a level of entry. So to understand that this is possible just with some basic prompting, you can create things. I think it really blows people's minds.
With your phone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. And I actually just taught a class a week ago at a local community college, and I had 6 people show up for an AI class, which is hilarious. But it's interesting because how diverse the crowd was, and none of them had a clue what they were there for, except
Exactly.
I had hinted at the idea in some prior classes that I was going to be teaching this, and so they came. Half of them came with interest of what is this thing you've been talking about. And I started with Chat GPT and ran them through how it works, and like let's throw some stuff at it and let them come up with things, and they were just blown away. And then I showed them,
Yeah.
Dolly and Stable Diffusion, and then jumped into Midjourney. And when they could, it's funny because you say, okay, what do you guys want to create? And everybody just goes silent. Like nobody's got an
Yeah.
idea.
They can't even think of a
Right.
thing.
But they don't even know where to go. So I said, okay, let's start with something simple. What's one topic you might be interested in? The lady was interested in horses because she works with grown horses. So we started with that. And then another person adds, let's do something with robots and cybernetics. And so you start blending all this together. It spits out this image, and they're like, okay, that is so cool. And it was
Yeah.
neat to
And it
watch
didn't
that.
exist
Yeah.
5 seconds ago. Like, that's the amazing thing to do.
Yeah. And
It's not like it's pulling in like a photo that it knows. It makes it for you. Live creates it. It's insane.
Right. And it's really fascinating because all of them, it's almost like, the Wizard of Oz scene where they're like, they see the man behind the curtain and they're trying to figure that out. They're trying to say, okay, so where did this come from? What is it referencing in order to create this? And so there's a whole mental process that we have to do because it doesn't line up with how we think of, creativity at all.
No, and it's so good that you don't think it can be that good either.
Right.
It's like, where's the man behind the man behind the man behind the man behind the curtain? Like,
Exactly.
there must be 20 levels deep of people like
For sure
hiding info from me because it's too good.
Well, I would love to see some of the work that you've done that you're kind of thrilled with, some stuff that you've created, and then show us what you've done, and then kind of talk about the inspiration behind some of these things. So just click on share there.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share. Where am I? A window, entire screen. Here we go. So I'll share myself and us first. Okay, and now if I can get to my. Okay, so first, let me know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Um. All right. So this looks like some sort of an art piece. You can see with the canvas around it or the framing.
Yeah.
And it's showing what I like to call inside the mind of an artist. So I've done 3 of these series. I'll just walk through them real quick. The first one was these kind of dark silhouettes with very bright and loud explosions of their mind into color is how I viewed it. It's like inside the mind of an artist. It's there's so much color and things up there.
Right.
The rest of the world is kind of drab and bland, and in their mind they're seeing all this color and it's kind of exploding and ready to get out of their bodies. So
Right.
that's what this whole series was. So this was part 1 of the series where I had these kind of canvas-like paintings with the dark silhouettes and really the art bursting from inside them in ways that showed that that's their safe space in the world, kind of is in their own head, and the rest
Right.
of the world is a little bit bland outside of that. So I'm just going to make sure I go through just the entire group of pictures, but you can tell that these are all very different. I think it's at the end of those. Okay.
These are great.
So that was series 1. I did a series 2, which were more traditional paintings, and some of them are really wild. There's a little bit more explodiness to some of the heads, but this was more like oil painting. And so this is my favorite one, where you can see, that brush really blasting his mind across the canvas.
Right.
But if I just show you some more, there's really intricate amounts of color and explosion things happening. But you can see some of the people. You'll see a man in just a moment who, yeah, he seems to be in pain with the art coming out of him, and I think that was a very cool image because it's like sometimes it is a pain to get that art from inside you out.
Right.
And I'm not sure if the series means that it's actually coming out. Some of them you can see they're hand drawn, so like it's maybe the artist actually getting it out of his mind and onto canvas.
Mm-hmm.
But other times there's just really cool things that look like almost like a Holly, that Holly Indian festival. It's like
Yeah.
a nuclear explosion of that coming out of their heads. Is probably my best way to describe it.
These are
But
cool.
these were all really cool ones that I was getting in the same vein of a series to see, inside the mind of an artist and what it's like, but with a more colorful interpretation without the external world there. So this is almost like as if it came out of that first group's mind and finally landed on canvas in various ways.
I like it.
So that spoke to me, and then I was like, okay, well, let me do a third one. This one had a lot more in it, so I'm just gonna quickly go through a few, but you get the point.
Yeah.
These are much more traditional art style of showing it on canvas, but without necessarily the frames, or also showing a lot of times the hand that creates the art as well. Now, my final one was anatomical drawings of what it's like to be inside the mind and body of an artist. So in this series, I did the similar type of thing, but I wanted to show the veins and the color coursing through our bodies.
Yeah.
In their way towards getting out of there. This was the first time I remember you reaching out to me going, "How'd you get it to split the image in
Yes.
half like that?" And I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing. That's how I did it?" But I was using anatomical drawings. I think P.A. Mondrian as a style source at one point. But I was doing these anatomical drawings with colorful kind of RGB veins, and it happened to spit out a couple of these vertically split ones that then me and you jammed on for a while to try to get a sunny, not so sunny scene. Which, if you look into the theme post yesterday for nature photography, I have one that looks like kind of what we were talking about. But
right.
This was the third in what I called the Inside the Mind of an Artist series, and that was a whole series that I did that was to show what it's like from the inside of a mind of an artist in my best mid-journey explorations. Now those are like 4 months old or something like that, so
Right.
that was pretty early on in the journey, but it's only gotten better and weirder. But I think that's a nice little encapsulation of a simplistic idea that you can then take and run with and do all sorts of different variations.
I like that you've got, three different processes with the same concept, but how it could be literally each one of those, you've got a dozen different images or more. And then you've got explorations that could totally take a totally different, like we've got on a totally different route. I keep saying totally. But it's really fascinating because this is what's amazing with Midjourney is you're not stuck with one specific thing. You can take,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I did the other day with the paper prompting. I spent a week talking about paper prompting, and I said, now take that same prompting and call it stainless steel or concrete or whatever. And then you can get a whole new look, but you're still getting that substructure like you would get from paper folding or whatever. That to me
Yeah.
is what I was trying to make a point of, and it took me a week to get there.
Well, one
Okay.
thing I think is funny is that so for artists, usually it takes them years to come up with an idea, master a specific type of medium, and
Right.
then get something out into the world. You saw I just had 3 different collections that were vastly different. One was like a graphic design one looked like oil paintings, one looked like anatomical designs that were done with, I don't know, maybe acrylics or something like that.
Right.
But I've tried on, as in wore the robe of an artist of a certain variety, and gotten sick of so many different art styles since starting Midjourney that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm done doing these whatever traditional oil paintings or something. I like
Right.
you as an artist, you can grow out of certain art styles
Yeah.
really quickly using Midjourney, whereas as a real artist, it would take you 2 or 3 years to go, that's not really my thing after
Right.
doing tons of work to study it and get it better. So like you can pretty quickly find, even if you're just a traditional artist, I don't know what we want to call them, but if you're just a traditional artist who wants to explore other mediums, explore other ways of doing what you do, you could find out a new way that you might be more jazzed to do in real life,
Yeah.
and that would be a way to get some of those who are resistant to it to get on board. Part of my chapter in your book is about the AI art world and the traditional art world clashing, and
Yeah.
so that's why a lot of times I'm trying to make things that aren't even replicatable by myself, uh, because how can you be mad at me if I don't even if I acknowledge the black box that it is and I'm a curator? It's
I
hard for
like
you
it.
to say that I am trying to be an artist or claim artistry, where I do think AI art is art, but I want to show them in the most ridiculous way that they can't really defend themselves against, because it's like, do you see the madness that I'm creating? Like,
Right.
uh, feel free to create it yourself in whatever medium you used to or in Midjourney, but I doubt you'll get there as quickly as I'll get to a new thing that is also weird and new. And I just want to keep staying ahead of the curve. I don't want to fall behind.
I think that's brilliant. Since we're talking about the book, the AI Explore collaborations, which is to me, I'm real excited about this. And this is why the podcast and YouTube channel is getting started. Is I wanted to engage with all of the people who are a part of this thing. But you've got a lesson that's really fascinating. So without going into teaching the lesson again, because we're getting ready to do that in the
Yes.
book, give us a little bit of the subject that you're covering and what's the biggest takeaway that you're hoping people's going to get out of your lesson?
I hope they start using a lot more emojis. So my lesson is about emojis, chaos, and using Midjourney as a slot machine. And what by that I mean, you want to get 777 or whatever the perfect slot
Right.
machine roll is, and I start out with just 4 emojis. I won't say which emojis they are, but I start with 4 emojis, and I'll show you. Here's those 4 emojis as is, and then here's them with a chaos of 33, a chaos of 66, and a chaos of 99. Now, chaos, to my knowledge, you can correct me because I've been saying this to everybody, and you can say, Ben, you've been lying to the world. But as far as I know, chaos isn't saying, hey, make it more crazy. What it does say is it'll take all the stuff you put into it and it'll randomly weight each
Yes.
of the characteristics so that you
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to focus on. And therefore, it makes them more wildly varied within each other, but
Yeah.
not necessarily a certain wildness in general. People think of chaos and they go, okay, you're just injecting more randomness into it in terms of it randomly doing all sorts of stuff, but it's randomly really doing your own thing in different proportions.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very accurate description. I think that works really well. And chaos can be, as you can see, it can be very chaotic in the kind of renders it can create. But this is really fun because you can take and apply chaos to a very static image, and really, when it does the 2x2 grids or the 4-ups, all four of them will be distinctly unique because the way the chaos is applied. So it's a fun
Yeah.
thing to kind of work with because it lets you get a lot of variety in the actual render or how the Midjourney works with it.
And I think just the way I set it up real quick is
Yeah,
to lead them through the chaotic journey of just the emojis. Then I pop in the word minimalism and walk through the same chaoticness, and you'll see that the chaos isn't as chaotic as you would think, as a
right,
human being would say. Just like random on an iPod or an iPad or an iPhone or a Spotify, it isn't truly random, because if it was truly random, you might get the same song twice in a row. But they want it
yeah,
to be human random, which is what humans think of. And so what I say is that the chaos in Midjourney isn't human chaos as we would think of it. It's more like machine chaos, as in
right,
it's going to rearrange what you write, and it'll give minimalism more and less weight, but there'll always be that minimalism factor to it. And so
right.
those generations, even in their most chaotic, aren't even close to the ones without the word minimalism, because Midjourney on its own generates such wild stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is where letting the machine out to play. This is where it really shows up, and I think this
Mm-hmm.
is what's been fun with what you create. Is I see so many people focused on creating the hyper realism stuff, and I'm fascinated and blown away with that kind of content. But the idea of let's see how chaotic we can push this thing, I think that's what's really fascinating that you bring to the table, is because you just kind of like turn it upside down, shake it up a little bit, tear it apart and throw it out there, and it's like, wow, that's really cool. So I think that's
Yeah.
fun because it's people get. There was a question asked just a couple days ago. Do people get overwhelmed with the visuals that they're getting exposed to? Because we're almost mid-journeying out, and Dolly and Stable Diffusion, like everybody's posting multiple images. We can become numb to it. But I think there's so
Mm-hmm.
much variety and chaos in what you're creating that you kind of create that interest of like, what in the world's going on there? I think this is what you're doing that makes it kind of stand out.
Yeah, I think it's also like, can you become numb to art? Because if
Right.
so, then yeah, sure, you might get numb. But there's so much it can do that I don't think there's any way I'm gonna ever get not obsessed with it. In fact, yesterday when I was doing that 16-hour clubhouse room or whatever, I ran through, I think, 15 hours of fast time in one day, and usually that's a whole month on the middle plan for
Right.
most people. So I was doing a lot of generating and a lot of simultaneous generations for different people. So the fact that I can be on a camera talking, also making jokes and talking to people while simultaneously creating amazing art in 5 different channels,
Right.
it's amazing. I feel like sometimes, like, let's say I'm using ChatGPT to generate Midjourney prompts. Now, people might not understand what that means, but taking one AI that spits out stuff based on logic in text form
Right.
and putting it into another AI, which is Midjourney, to make art. Sometimes I feel like I'm the middleman between two AIs, and I'm slowing down the process. And like, if they could just talk to each other, I wouldn't even need to be there sometimes. But
Right.
I'm glad I'm the cog in the system that slows it down just a bit and makes it less robotic, and also I can be that curator. But what's amazing to me is, so like in my lesson for your book, I only did one re-roll and everything came out exactly as I wanted it. So it's getting so good.
Right.
And that re-roll didn't even need to happen. I almost wanted to keep it totally pure and have no re-rolls. But I was like, this one just doesn't, it's not up to snuff with the rest. So I re-rolled that one, but everything else just came out exactly as I ran it the first time. And I try to note which one it is. And I might even
Right.
show the one that I didn't upscale, but it's with the method that I use, I found, especially if you know the magic emojis are the ones that are like really powerful,
Right.
um, you can create things that are almost 100% of the time going to be something you're interested in, or at least uh, does something cool that you might not have thought of.
Right. Now, I think this is what's fascinating is, the we begin discovering things that have a little more impact, where we're used to the idea of having a conversation, but now our conversations with the AI, of
Hmm.
finding out how to talk to it in a way to get the results that we're after. And you're right, it's becoming, I don't have to prompt really long things anymore to get some really cool results. Um, but even then, it's like the more you add actually begins detracting the quality. Where it used to be the other way around just
Yep.
a month ago. So it's fascinating to
Hmm.
watch. How do you see text to art technology being used in industries
Oh yeah.
outside of the traditional art world?
So I imagine most people in corporate right now have no idea what's going on with it. They just see this stuff pop up. They don't see any use for it. But once you show them, hey, we can take this idea, and we can give you a ton of artwork related to it. Let's say you're a clothing company or a jewelry company or
Right,
whatever. We can save you all that photography time, all the models, all the everything, just by first running through at least the ideation phase in mid journey, and then you can go take real pictures if you still want to like have your actual diamond jewelry in the thing on someone's hand. But for the most part, you can do almost anything in terms of graphic design, mock-ups, all sorts of things that you couldn't previously do. So I think what's going to happen is some of the marketing teams, some of the graphic design teams of these companies are going to start going, I'm going to start playing with this, just like some of the copywriters are probably playing with GPT and trying to figure out how they can do their job a little bit
right,
quicker. Um, and then they'll start saying, hey, boss man, check out this cool thing I made. And they'll go, oh, how'd you do that? And also, can we use it? And I'm sure you know the rule about if you make over $1 million a year as a company, you need a corporate plan or whatever. But I think they will all start getting on board once they see the speed at which they can get results
agreed.
and the quality. But what's going to suck is that they won't pass any of those time savings on to the graphic design team. They will just make them churn out 300 images instead of the usual 20,
Right,
and they'll still work 40 hours a week and all that other stuff. So it's like the industrialization thing where we gain efficiency, but the people who really gain from it are the overlords who keep us in our place. So I always tell people, keep the time you save. If you're going to take this to your boss, tell them it took you 5 hours or whatever it usually takes to make that kind of art. Don't tell them it's like a 20-second action on a machine where you write text, because
yeah.
A, they won't get it, and B, you know, your expertise that probably got you to be able to write something that's a succinct sentence that actually results in that could involve a lot of your graphic design background that isn't getting its credit.
Oh, certainly, certainly. Yeah, this is something that we've pointed out multiple times now in chats and conversations on LinkedIn is that your background, your knowledge that you bring to the table is impacting the kind of things that you're going to be able to create because you're using that reference knowledge. And I think it's actually, you're perfect for this category, talking about using AI in industries outside of the art world, because you did the escape room thing as an educational
Hmm.
element of Excel, teaching Excel. Like Excel is not known, except for the one artist I shared with you, it's not known as an
Yeah.
art platform. So the fact that you're using AI art to teach that space is absolutely brilliant. Tell a little bit about that, if you would. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I've got actually a whole team of interns in Canada, a whole class helping me develop it. But basically, I say I'm doing the impossible, making Excel fun, and I don't even think I fulfilled that goal, if I'm being honest, because a lot of times my examples are income statements and balance sheets and cash flows and things that are not inherently fun.
Right.
I might use the office characters and Jim and Pam and Dwight and whatnot and try to make it fun in certain ways or whatnot. But now I'm generating. I gave them maybe 116 different escape rooms, and told them try to come up with some ideas for how you can incorporate an Excel lesson into this. So one simplistic example would be to, let's say, all of my I'm doing a who done it on who stole the Queen's diamonds, and so there's, let's say, 8 characters, right?
Mhm.
And you find in a room scribbled on a wall the number 42.8 or something, and then you realize that that is the sum total of their ranking of superhero characters, on a 1 to 10 scale for 10 different superheroes or something. So I'll teach them how to use the sum function and all these other things to find out which one of the people has that as their total score, and then maybe that leads them to being innocent or guilty. but I got to basically wrap a story around the sum function or the VLOOKUP function or different things in Excel, while also showing them these amazing pieces of artwork. And I want it to be like a choose your own adventure type of thing. So you go down one
Right.
path and it brings you into a time machine that takes you to the moon, and then you go down another path and it takes you subatomic into the molecules. But either way, I might teach the same lesson wherever you go,
Right.
in terms of what they learn in Excel. But I want them to be more engaged in the story and trying to figure out, oh, how does this mystery get solved, and how do I get out of this escape room, which becomes really the universe, because I can send you all over. I can send you subatomic. I can send you to space. So it's more like, how do I get to the end of this story? And it doesn't even necessarily have to have an end. As long as you know what lessons you're teaching, you can keep bringing them down that rabbit hole of Excel. But they might be more interested in learning what's going to happen next, because they really want to find out who's innocent or who stole the
Right.
thing or who killed somebody or whatever it is. But I try to keep it so it's okay for kids as well. So it'll probably be stealing the Queen's diamonds, but generating a lot of art that has escape rooms based on like the game Minesweeper, the game Battleship, or Scrabble, or using elements of things that are gridded
Right.
in terms of, and like a periodic table of the elements, things like that, in my prompts to make rooms that have elements that can be translated to Excel, which is typically, gridded spreadsheets.
Right. I think there's a brilliance there, though, because if you can tie story to learning something, you're going to mesh them together, and they'll go that place in the story where that's how we do this thing. That's a
Yeah,
fascinating
it's a
approach to education.
storytelling is like the oldest art
Yeah.
form known to mankind, and so if you can wrap that into some of the newest technology, you have a better chance of learning them. It's almost like how you can't get song lyrics out of your head. I still remember
Right.
song lyrics from songs from 20 years ago. If I had an Excel song that was popular, you could probably teach people how to use, all sorts of functions if I was a better musician.
That would be really cool. That's coming next. So there
Yeah,
are some
exactly.
AI platforms now that can create songs and even sing. So that'll be really interesting as that refines itself.
If you listen to my AICC manifesto reading,
I did.
the music that was underneath it was created by AI as well.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, that I actually like the AICC manifesto. That was very well written. And it's probably, did he do it
It
through
took me that
ChatGPT?
to read it. I didn't read it until I read it for the audio, because I hate reading. So I was like, this will get me to read it.
Right.
And yeah, it was way better than I thought. But I see a wall of text and I go, give me the TLDR, give me the too long didn't read version,
Right.
because my ADHD goes, I don't want to do this, but if I'm recording it for audio purposes for like a reading, I'm gonna try to nail all the parts. Now I wish I was a little more enthusiastic in my reading, but I was also reading it for the first time, and I edited out a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah.
But I won't say mistakes, but mistakes. And uh, I think what I came up with was, at least it showed a bunch of images of mine,
Hmm.
along with the manifesto, and a little bit of music in the background. And I thought it was pretty decent, considering I barely know what I'm doing when it comes to video editing, and so that was fun. And I think using AI to make music, the way I use it is a thing called SoundDraw.io, but you put in like happy, confident, fearful, whatever. There's all sorts of emotions, moods you can put in. You can put in
Right.
time length. So mine was 1:30. You put in all these stipulations, and then it spits out stuff. And you can even modify it to like a beat map thing. You can like say, oh well, right now it's hitting a high part. Bring it down to a medium. Like change the overall
Right.
structure as you dig into it. So it's really interesting. But it's also YouTube certified and all that other stuff. So it's cool what they're doing. I've only seen that one platform, but I know there's other platforms that are doing machine learning in music, and
Right.
AI in creation of music. So I'm looking forward to that as well, because, like I said, I'm a musician of sorts. I play guitar. I was in a band back in Boston, and we played one show at the Cantab Lounge in Central Square. But then my keyboardist moved to Canada, and we couldn't reform as a trio. So our 8 months of making original music came to an end, but at least it ended in one last big hurrah of a
Right.
show at an actual bar. So I can say I was in a band and I was a musician, even if it was just that one night.
That's pretty cool. I mean, not everybody has that to their credit, so that's pretty awesome start. Yeah, that's neat. Uh, It's funny. So one of the questions we've addressed already, which was, can you talk about innovative or unique uses of text art? And that's basically your whole approach is unique and innovative approaches.
Yeah, I don't want it to be normal. I want it to be weird and wacky and fun because
Uh,
that's like, I mean, the fat cats. There's all sorts of things that are, which those are just basically oversized, almost human-sized cats that
right,
are very fluffy. Sometimes mean, look like they want to get into, a scrap with you in the
right.
alleyway. Uh, they're the I call them the fat cats, but they should be more like alley cats. But they are they're just a fun little exploration of three words: obese, fluffy cat. If you put that into Midjourney, you'll get some hilarious results. And so I like sometimes the simplicity of the weirdness. You can
Right,
just add three words that don't necessarily go together or combine in a way that makes something totally weird but unique.
yeah.
And I think that's the power of the emojis as well, is that you don't know how it's going to interpret emojis.
Hmm.
And when you stack them together, it really gets interesting. And then you add the chaos. You're
Yeah,
really not sure what you're going to get. But a
right.
lot of times it's like pretty cool stuff.
Agreed, agreed. I've been able to use, because my background and what I do, my main business is I do branding. And so you spend a lot of time developing, the keywords for the client in regards to what are the words we want to associate with this brand. And it's neat to be able to take those ideas, dump them into Midjourney with a color set, and it spits out all kinds of interesting things. So there's so
Hmm.
many. Goes back to the last question, really, of how is this going to be used in other industries? There's really an unlimited possibility set, that's there.
Yeah. By saying it's unlimited and a set, you're kind of lying to yourself, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's only limited to our imagination, which I
right,
guess perhaps is a limitation, but we're finding out new ways each day of pushing our own imagination by using the imagine function to really figure out how to get new and innovative art, or even not innovative. I mean, people sometimes just will like to generate stuff that's like a Rockwell painting or
right,
whatever from back in the day, but anything to get them started by realizing that they have access to this thing that can make not only amazing artwork, but if you have any sort of accessibility issue, if you're blind, you can make art. If you're I mean, there's so many different use cases for people who literally can't physically make art to be able
right.
to do it via a text-based prompting solution
Yes.
like Midjourney.
Yeah, I've got a friend, a connection I've gained through LinkedIn. His name's PJ Way, and he'll be on one of these podcasts in the future. His daughter is handicapped and physically unable to use her hands to manipulate the mouse and such, but she can communicate with the computer and generate art with Midjourney. And that to me is fascinating because this is where you're beginning to see the true power of technology for opening up the
Hmm.
creative potential of people who otherwise simply can't do it. Um,
Yeah, it
there's beauty there.
democratizes the art world because
Yeah,
usually it's in the hands of the highfalutin crowd, and I like that it's becoming more available to those who can just, if you can afford $10 a month, you can be generating some really interesting stuff before you know it. And we're always, what I love about our group specifically, and you in particular, is that you always are trying to teach how you got to where you are. A lot of people are
right,
like, "Here's my amazing art. Don't ask me how I made it." And
right,
I'm always like, "Please ask me how I made it. I'd love to show you like what's behind the scenes." But you're already like, "Here's everything you need to know." And I'm like,
right.
"Brian, how do you even think like that?" You're like, "Okay, I'm gonna think in advance and just give them every single piece of the story to teach them." And that's because you've been a teacher for so long and you're used to
Yeah.
like breaking things down to that structure. But I'm still used to being wacky and wild. So I'll happily to share my prompts with anybody, but most of the time I'm too busy prompting something else to even
You got to keep it
figure out how to
moving.
complain it.
Well, aside
Yeah.
from the book that we're doing right now, have there been other AI collaborations that you've been a part of?
Yes. So we did a little bit of thing. I don't know how secret it is. We did in our AIC secret for Don Julio because they had that thing they were putting together for I forget the company that was presenting to them, but they wanted an AI art portion of their presentation to show that we could generate some things in the style of Don Julio tequila. And so taking in, like you're saying, the things that represent that brand and
Yeah.
then putting them into a lot of image generations. I could see that being an avenue for exploration of it. I'm going to be using it in my training, my Excel training. I'm also going to be like we've talked about writing in your book, but I also want to figure out new ways of teaching people how to use it. And so my newest way is via Clubhouse and bringing people in through there. So you'll see a big influx in the AICC server for folks who are of varying degrees of knowledge, but
Hmm.
all very interested in finding out more. And once you realize there's a smaller community than the 10 million in Midjourney that you can join and learn from, especially our group, which has like a really high percentage of amazing people,
Right.
um, it's hard for me not to suggest, hey, you should come learn from all these people, including me. But I'm so unreliable in terms of when I'll be there to tell you
Right.
that you might as well just hook up with everybody, and we'll all teach you.
Yeah, I've noticed that the AICC group particularly is very open and engaging and helpful, and it's been really fascinating and it's very supportive. The things, of course, I get the advantage of posting something new and fresh every day in there, but I see everybody else that's posting are getting a lot of engagement and likes and comments and feedback. So it's really, really cool. And it's very open and
Yeah,
sharing for
props
the
to
most part.
Seth. I just want to give a props to Seth for starting that,
Oh, for
because
sure. Certainly.
it was his brainchild. It's maybe gotten out of his control in some certain ways, but I think that's how he likes it in certain instances, because he's all about spreading the word in different ways, and
Yeah.
so that's why I'm trying
Oh,
to
certainly.
figure out untapped markets like Clubhouse, because I used to be obsessed with Clubhouse,
Right.
and I kind of fell off it, and now I'm back on that horse, and I'm running AICC official Midjourney rooms. We live streamed the town talk to about 85 to 100. I don't know. It depends. At any moment, there's like 70 people in the room, but it
Right.
keeps track of how many people come in and out over time.
Right.
So I think in total, after all was said and done, we had at least 500 to 700 people come in the room over those 16 hours. Some people stayed for like 10 to 20, or sorry, 10 to 12 of those hours,
Wow.
because they were having so much fun. Diane, whose birthday it was yesterday as well, she was in England, and she was on all the way from till her birthday ended at midnight, and then she's still there at 7 a.m. In England. In England, I'm like, you gotta go to sleep, and then she might have fell asleep halfway through it, but
Yeah.
because you can be on mute and listening. But it was such a fun time that we're gonna be doing more of those. I'm gonna try to live stream the town talk every week in Clubhouse,
That's a great
and
idea.
trying to grow that community, because a lot of times it's great to be able to listen to the audio
Hmm.
and then follow along on a Discord or whichever way you do. When you have
Nice.
people in a certain environment, it's sometimes hard to show them the visual with the audio.
Right. No, I like that. I like that you found a new way to utilize something that's almost getting passed over by a lot of people now. It's kind of like we've moved on and you're just not seeing the same level of engagement, but you're fully there making it happen. That's so
Yeah,
cool. Uh, can you discuss, from your perspective, any ethical considerations or potential negative impacts the text to art technology, and then how you kind of approach addressing this, with people that you're running across?
absolutely. So, I'm gonna bring up real quickly my chapter for your book, because I do talk about this in there. And if I can't figure it out, I'll figure it out. Okay. So, uh, screw it. I'll just go off the top of my head because that's better usually. One sec. Let me get back to your window. Okay. So, my thing is, AI art folk, or traditional art folks, first of all, chill out. We get it. We're stepping on your toes. We're getting into your zone. No one likes the thing they've been working on for 30 years to essentially be potentially doable in much less time, when you've put in the time and the effort to make things that are incredibly complex. Now, me as an Excel purist will say I used to make the craziest spreadsheets possible, but that doesn't mean I want to spend all my time making spreadsheets. And I can imagine a lot of artists don't want to spend all their time doing the making of the art that they don't like, taking out the
Right.
components that they don't like. But either way, let's just say we're talking about copyright infringement, or like stepping on their toes in that way, because they're like, I didn't give my permission for this model to be trained by my images. That's a classic thing I hear. And I think, well, if I was going to go paint a painting based on your style, I would go look at all your pictures that are freely available online, and my human brain would look at them all and try to piece together what that means. and then I would try to make some poor replica of it. But if I tried for a while, I could get better at making it.
Right.
Now, just like in the 1800s, when or whenever it was when the camera came out, and portrait artists were like, "What the hell? You're blowing up my spot."
Right.
I usually have someone sit in a chair for 2 weeks while they look depressed, and I paint them. And then now you're
Yeah.
telling me they can look at a camera for 3 minutes and look depressed, and still we can get an 1800s depressed person on film or on portrait, but now you can do it faster. What the hell? I'm pissed. And
Right.
then fast forward to digital cameras, fast forward to the internet. Everybody who's done anything and learned it the hard way is like, what the hell? There's an easy way. I don't like this because my job's going to be threatened or whatever. But if you're one of the type of artists who's instead going to embrace it, use it as part of your tool set, and help it make you a better artist,
Right.
you'll have a way more of an advanced starting place than me or Brian, for example, because we're coming at it as a technological person mindset for the most part.
Yeah.
If you bring your graphic design knowledge and all of your years of experience, like framing things and doing things with photography or whatever it is you do, you'll have a much better chance of getting your results just like you want them out of Midjourney than we have by tinkering with all the different things we've tinkered to get to where we're at today.
Yeah.
You might be able to leapfrog a lot of that because you're putting it into your tool set rather than saying, no, I'm a purist. I only make things that take 3 weeks to make. Get out of here with your 20-second long generations. And it's like, well, you could still do your long thing, but just do some ideation in
Right.
Midjourney, and then still paint a painting the way you usually do. There's nothing wrong with that, and if anything, it'll make it so your art might improve.
Right. Yeah. My degree in college was commercial art. So I actually studied the
Oh,
paintings of the masters, both commercially and figurative and everything else, in the art space. And one of the things we did as part of our program is we did a master copy, which means we took an existing artist, we took one of his or her paintings, and we
mm-hmm.
reproduced it exactly. So we didn't just match the style; we reproduced the painting.
Yeah, that's
And
the hard way of doing what Midjourney does a lot of times for
yeah,
some people. Yeah,
what's the thing is you're learning by recreating this. You're learning and teaching your mind how to see as the artist did, and then you can take that learning and apply it to new styles for yourself. So in a way, Midjourney is fast tracking that. It's looking at the
yeah,
thing. But here's the thing, and I think people understand is even prompting with the artist name, it's far more difficult to recreate exactly an existing
yes,
painting. Even with all the descriptions and prompts, it's going to come up with something new. And if you ran the
yeah.
same prompt a dozen times, it's going to give you a dozen different things. It's not going to be the same.
It's not meant to be a replicator of
Right.
art. It's you can put something in their style and it'll try
Right.
to figure out what that means. But yeah, to get Starry Night exactly as Starry Night, you're not going to get it out of Midjourney because it's
No.
not meant for that. And it's not even trying to do that.
Yeah, you do a much better
Um,
job doing that with Fresco or with Adobe Photoshop than you ever
hmm
will with Midjourney and Dolly and Stable Diffusion.
and one thing I want to say is I went to undergrad for accounting, which is like the comedian's joke of the most boring job possible. And then I got my master's degree in business, my MBA with a concentration in accounting. So, point is, I'm now free from the shackles of the boring corporate world I was in. And now I can create art on my own in ways that I
Yeah.
never imagined. And just like you were saying, you started out in art. I had to do that on the side randomly. I had like a Dexter like setup in my basement for the oil painting because it gets everywhere.
Yeah.
And then I had to have a whole dresser where I could let them dry for 2 weeks. So I'd have like multiple paintings drying at the same time. And I'm like, this is not efficient. Dust is getting onto my paintings. Like there's so
Right.
many things that you have to learn and so many art supplies. The amount of money you save just by going to Midjourney with it, that alone, it's to me like it's ridiculous if you know that this exists and you don't use it in some respect just because
Right.
you're resistant to technology or change or whatever it is. Why not let it work for you and help you and at least see what it is?
Yeah. The
How does
concepting
curiosity
alone.
not get you in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. So one last question and I'll wrap us up here. But how do you personally stay inspired to continue to push the boundaries of what's possible with text art?
the easiness of it. So I come up with a stupid idea, I pop it into my phone, I hit send, and then I see what comes back. It's not like it's something that I have to think about that long. If I'm like, oh, I wonder what a you know a bear that's like on a toothpick would
Right.
look like, and I just came up with that on the top of my head. Now I'm gonna go generate that in a minute. But
Yeah.
like, would it look like a giant toothpick with a bear on it? Would it look like a little mini bear on a regular sized toothpick? I don't know what it'll spit out, but I know what I want it. I got a vague idea what I want to see, which would be the smaller bear and the
Right.
toothpick. But I'll probably use some emojis and some weird stuff to get there. And who knows? Maybe it'll spit out some hand with 6 fingers
Of
for all I
course.
know. But what I like is that I can very easily and quickly on my phone just type in a thing, hit send, not even think about it, come back later, upscale some things, vary some things, maybe send the prompt again, and you can just do that throughout your day. Like you're vacuuming, and then you got a moment's break where you thought about something, and you just go, okay, I'll send that through and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's so quick and so easy that I do it all the time. I mean, it's just any idea pops into my head, instead of trying to keep it in my mind, I'll just throw it into Midjourney.
It's just as fast as leaving a text message, and you can do it anywhere you can get
It
internet access.
it's faster, and also it makes a picture.
Yeah. I was at my son's wrestling tournament, and we had the lowest, most pitiful. You couldn't make a phone call and get a signal, but there's
Oh,
enough of a signal that I could actually still see Midjourney. And I was
yeah.
sending
Even if you
prompts.
can just send it and you
Yeah.
can't see the results, that's
So it was
enough
great. I go back to the
service.
house and I look and I'm like, this is really cool what I created. Just had no clue.
Yeah.
Uh, I really appreciate your time, Ben. This was fantastic. So, question: this is the wrap up, but what would be kind of a big takeaway that you want to leave with people in regards to Midjourney, and then kind of as a tie it all together. Leave us with ways people can find out more about what you're doing and how to reach you.
Yeah. So I think just get started with Midjourney. If you haven't done it yet, just get started. If you're confused how to, there's plenty of like guides as to how to download Discord, how to get on Midjourney. But I'd say to go to discord.gg/AICC, which is the AICC official Discord. That's our server.
Yeah,
Brian's in there. I'm in there. A lot of the artists who are going to be featured in your books are there.
yeah,
And I'd say learn from the masters, or I'm not saying I'm a master. I'm saying there's other people in there who are infinitely more skilled than me. So when I have an issue, I know I can chime into someone else and get some help from them.
yeah.
In order for where to find me, you can look up the Failure Guy podcast wherever podcasts are available. It'll show up, and feel free to listen to or not listen to any episodes. I would say listen to any that strikes your fancy, but my episode 51 was with my 90-year-old grandmother who has MS. And so she talks about being born in 1931 and then seeing it go from no TV to being on a podcast on the phone talking to me and trying to explain that to her in a way that's digestible to the human race. So it took us 6 phone calls, and I had to do my basically my magnum opus of editing a audio experience to make sure that it was understandable. But it was for MS Awareness Month, and she's fabulous. I just got to see her this past Christmas, and
Awesome.
I call her every Sunday. Talked to her yesterday too for my birthday, but she's one of the best people I've ever met. And so I'd say if you're going to start with an episode, that's a good one. If you want to learn Excel training, I've got excelexposure.com. But above all else, I'd say connect with me on LinkedIn, of all places. I resisted for 15 years, meaning I had an account since 2007, but I didn't really use it for much except for a resume holder.
Yeah,
And so now that I'm actually using it to grow my following and to share things, I'd say connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way.
that's awesome. Ben, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I love the stuff that you're putting out there creatively. You keep me on my toes to come up with new things as well. So I like that. And definitely listen to your podcast. I'll make sure to include a link across the bottom there, because I really enjoyed the ones you did after you got back from your podcast symposium that you were a part of. There were some really interesting things happening there. So that kind of got me hooked, and I've enjoyed listening in.
When you start out, no one wants to be on your podcast, so you get a lot of life coaches and things like that. Nothing wrong with life coaches and stuff, but
Right.
I'm getting to the point where I'm getting too many interesting guests, and I'm trying to figure out how to schedule them properly. So I'd say,
Right.
some of the more recent stuff might be a little bit more appealing, but I appreciate the shout out there because that was my first public speaking appearance, and it was it lit a fire in me that hadn't been lit in a while in terms of my podcast, and also just the thing that I did. I've been doing the podcast over 3 years, so it seems like I can get sick of things pretty easily, especially when it seems like it's a one-way relationship podcast.
Right.
A lot of times you'll just send it out there and you don't get a lot of feedback, so I appreciate those kind words.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you, Ben. I'll see you in LinkedIn for sure, probably on the Discord again as well. In other words, you guys, thanks so much for joining us for AI Explorer, the AI Creative or Creators Collective. Let me try that again. The AI Explorer Creators Collective. So anyway, thanks again, Ben, and always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And also, by the way, I've messed up people's names. I've messed up everything you can possibly mess up in a podcast interview, so don't worry. You'll fail it till you nail it, as I say, and you'll figure it out. So I'm excited to be a guest on the podcast, and I can't wait to see and listen to what happens with it.
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Hi guys, I'm Wahib Yousaf, and I found Brian Sykes' AI Explorer post on LinkedIn. Brian goes really into depth in regards to specific prompts you can use for all sorts of designs, whether it's 2D, 3D, dioramas, fashion, architecture, engineering, whatever it is. You can get great help if you buy his books and listen to his podcast.